Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Sunday service, or the Easter Sunday service, or the not-so-Easter Sunday service, with the Atheist Reformation. Joining me once again is my co-host, Harry. How are you doing this week, Harry?
Confused?
That's okay. That's how we like to keep you, and it's not that difficult. Anyways, today we've got a few articles going through, most of which, actually I think all of which were proposed by Harry, so this would be kind of an interesting thing to take a look at. As always, I would like to remind everybody to please like, comment, and subscribe, and also to click the notification bell icon. It's on that side. Over there, yeah. Next to the subscribe button after you click and you're subscribed. Yeah, Harry's pointing in the... No, not that direction. It's that way. There you go. All right, now you can stop. As always, we do link all the articles in the video description down below if you'd like to go and review them for yourselves, even though for the most part we kind of go through all of them, or through them in their entirety. Also, please remember to like and follow the Atheist Reformation on facebook.com/the Atheist Reformation. And if you would like to propose an article to be covered on the Sunday show, or you would like to be on one of the other shows on here, particularly the Discussions with Atheist show, which we just wrapped one up last night, and I hope everybody that watched it enjoyed it. We had a few live viewers and some commenters, which was awesome. You can send an email to the atheistreformation@gmail.com while Harry is screwing around with his camera if you want to be on the show. So, Harry.
Yes, sir.
I came up with some creative names for the articles that we're going to be covering today.
Okay.
Since we like those. So the first one we're going to cover is going to be called Pandemic Plague.
Okay.
And that's going to be one of the first ones you offered up. And is coronavirus one of the plagues in the book of Revelation? This coming from Christianity.com. Boy howdy, Harry, when you find one, you find a doozy. I'll give you that one. So, yeah, I will definitely grant you that. So, many people automatically look to connect any large-scale disaster to Revelation and see in it a sign of the end. But should we? So let's, at least as this, let's hope that this is, tempered with reason. We're going to go with. Alright, so we're going to skip through a little bit of this, and because it talks about social distancing, the coronavirus thing, so everybody's pretty well versed in what's going on with that. So, what is the coronavirus?
No, not what is the. I love the phrasing there.
What is this coronavirus? Yes. Okay,
Yeah.
I do like that. I do like that because coronavirus is a class of viruses. It is not one particular disease. Although what is referred to as what's spreading right now is the novel coronavirus. It's one that we have not experienced before. So yes, coronavirus is a family that includes family of viruses that include common cold, seasonal flu, MERS, and SARS. World Health Organization has given this particular coronavirus the acronym COVID-19 for Coronavirus Disease 2019. Its actual name is SARS-CoV-2, although it is seldom used by the press. So, there seems to be a correlation, or it seems to be related to the wildlife trade in China, particularly out of the Wuhan province. Highly infectious, seems to have a current mortality rate of around 3 to 4%. Although that is still not completely known for sure, as it's not yet fully run its course, so we're not going to know until it's over, essentially.
And also limited testing.
Yes, also limited testing in a lot of countries. So, we will see where it goes from that. Now, is COVID-19 one of the 7 plagues mentioned in Revelation 16:17? That's chapters 16 and 17. So, this author believes there are at least a couple of reasons not to identify this virus with one of the plagues. The first reason is that these 7 plagues are supposedly identified as the completion of God's wrath, and the plagues seem directed solely towards those who belong to the kingdom of the Antichrist. But this virus is not discriminating. No virus is discriminating. There seems to be no one who is immune to it. Saint and skeptic alike are affected by it. So basically, it's saying it's killing a lot of who they think are the wrong people. So I mean, if that's what it takes for you, okay.
I guess if there was ever a virus that came about and it only killed people that don't believe in Jesus, then that would be a sign of the apocalypse.
Yeah, I suppose.
But until that moment, this is not one of the tribulations listed in Revelations.
Okay. Second reason is given is that one of the plagues of Revelation is that we know the source of this virus. As many coronaviruses do, it jumped from an animal to a human and spread from there. COVID-19 is simply more contagious than most, as well as generally more deadly. Okay, yes. So I suppose that the 7 plagues listed in Revelations, they're supposed to be of unknown origin, essentially. Or supposedly. Anyways. To all appearances, COVID-19 seems to be just a natural event rather than a supernatural action of God. So, I will happily spread the word on this one, in that I am glad that there is some kind of sensibility coming out of the religious community in saying that, no, this is not the end times. These are moderates that are trying to temper the insanity of those who seem to think these things. So, as always, I like to give credit where credit is due. This person seems to be doing a good job of tempering insanity with logic. Goes on to refer to other plagues or other pandemics and epidemics that we've seen. As if it could be a sign. Again, doesn't believe so, because the bubonic plague, or the Black Death, killed 30 to 60% of the population of Europe back in the 14th century. 1918, the Spanish flu, which was actually a version of H1N1. Many people don't know that, so there you go. Killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. So, a lot. And then it talks about Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, as well as the 20 million deaths in World War I and 75 million in World War II. None of those are plagues. So there you go. And we're going to skip the preachy bits because I don't think they're relevant. And the rest of it is just preachy bits. Okay, so.
Basically, a summary of the preachy bits is that technically anything that is bad that happens is a sign of getting closer to the end times. You just have no idea how far off that end, finish line is. Just things are going to continuously get worse until they get better.
But the problem is the whole periodicity of it is because we see things get bad, get better, get bad, get better, get bad, get better. There's not a consistent just getting worse and worse and worse.
You're right.
In fact, as a society, we seem to be getting better and better as time goes on.
Yeah.
We get rid of bad societies, and then we rebuild as a better one. We seem to have stagnated a bit currently. We're having a harder time eschewing bad ideas in favor of good ones, but it's still happening. We're still slowly but surely chipping away at the bad ideas and replacing them with good ones. So I would say all of that kind of flies in the face of Revelation. We're certainly not working towards that.
I would go a step further and disagree with you on whether we've stagnated. I think that if you look at the statistics, we've been improving in a lot of areas.
Yes, we have been improving in a lot of areas. It just, there's this overwhelming feeling of stagnation because these same bad ideas keep getting brought up over and over and over again. That's more what I'm saying, is that there's this perception of stagnation. I probably should have been more clear on that, so that's my fault.
Yeah, I think what's amazing is that we've had a curve of just a miraculous increase. You would probably say miraculous is a terrible word to use, but I mean, just a substantial and overwhelming increase in awareness of what's going on around us. There's so much user-submitted content. There's so much reporting on very minute stories that as soon as something happens, it's known worldwide. And we're overwhelmed with the negativity, and we ignore the fact that crime rates have gone down, that things are getting better, that people are getting more fed, that more people are getting increases in their salaries, and
that lifespans are increasing, that medical science is improving. Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, and I'm fine with you using the term. I'm fine with using the term miraculous, as long as I get to use it synonymously with magical.
There is a magical use of the internet going on right now.
There you go. Because see, that's what honestly what I hear is every time someone tells me to have a blessed day, in the back of my mind it plays as have a magically enchanted day.
It's magically delicious.
I'll let you get away with that because you're kind of a ginger. But that's your one.
My test results will be coming in.
Okay. So anyway, any other discussion you'd like to offer up on this one? It seems pretty straightforward.
Don't freak out. Be nice to everyone.
So basically, just listen to Bill and Ted. Be excellent to each other. Wild stallions.
Exactly. Be excellent to each other. Stop hoarding toilet paper.
Yeah, I mean, come on, people. Other people need to wipe their asses too. Not everyone can afford to buy a bidet.
And whenever they open the economy back up, don't complain about going to work.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be another one. Like, oh man, I got to go back to work. Yeah, it's not a permanent vacation, dude. Anyway. All right, so moving on to our next story. And yes, I came up with a goofy name for this one too, since it's the Pope. And it's a new name. It's called Conversion Virus 19.
Oh gosh, no. Why? Why?
Because Pope Francis says pandemic can be a place of conversion.
Yes, and that's not even the reason why I shared this story with you.
I know, but that headline right there, it was too good to pass up the opportunity to make that joke.
Did you know that if you torture someone enough and you give them the option of salvation, that they might take it?
Really? I mean, gosh, it's like, has anyone ever heard of the Inquisition? Has anyone ever read Edgar Allan Poe's The Pit and the Pendulum?
No one's heard of the Inquisition because no one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
Ah, yes, the Spanish Inquisition, but I mentioned the Inquisition as a whole. They started in Italy.
Oh, the Italian Inquisition. The lesser known of the Inquisitions.
Although they were the more prolific. As in, like, they did more and ran longer than the Spanish did, if I remember correctly.
That would make sense.
But anyways, I mean, hell. Anyway, so in an exclusive interview recorded for this publication, Pope Francis says that this extraordinary Lent and Eastertide. I'd only heard of high tide and low tide, but apparently there's Eastertide as well. I guess that's when all the Easter eggs suddenly flood the coastlines.
Yes. It also seems like it has something to do with the Great Garbage Patch.
Maybe so.
Also kind of made me think of Charlie Brown and the Great Pumpkin Patch.
I can ship that.
Different holiday. That's Halloween, not Easter.
I know, but I can ship that. I mean, yeah, instead of Charlie Brown or the Cabbage Patch Kids, could be the Garbage Pail Kids and Trash Island.
Yeah.
Anyway, could be a moment of creativity and conversion for the church, for the world, and for the whole of creation. I'm intrigued by what he could mean by a moment of creativity. Because creativity and conversion. To me that just sounds like And I would think the same thing if it was a politician saying those words.
Is it though?
Is it not, though?
I really regret having said that on a live stream.
I
We've all
mean,
seen Godfather 3.
yeah. But anyways, no, if a politician had said this exact thing, or really if any like kind of talking head, kind of pundit had said, could be a moment of creativity and conversion for something, to me that reeks of how can we come up with some convincing bullshit to get you on our side using this?
I mean, is there ever like there's a difference between
I
some
mean, I'm just saying, like the choice. I'm saying that whether the intention is good or bad, it's a poor choice of words for skeptically minded individuals.
to the cynic, there is no difference between propaganda and silver linings.
Huh? I must be a cynic then. No, more often I'm a realist. It's like I'll take silver linings where they appear, but at the same time, you have to recognize that as it being an optical illusion.
Yeah.
So silver linings and propaganda at that point would be oddly synonymous, since propaganda is simply a media version of an optical illusion to get you to believe what they're trying to sell. So, anyways, going on within the story itself, towards the end of March, I suggested to Pope Francis that this might be a good moment to address the English speaking world. The pandemic that had so affected Italy and Spain was now reaching the UK, the US, and Australia. Okay, so interview conducted in Spanish. He translated himself. First question about was he was experiencing the pandemic and lockdown, both in the Santa Marta residence and the Vatican administration more widely. So, not really concerned with how they're doing that.
Let's get down to the whole global warming comment.
We'll get to there. We'll get to that in a minute. Let's see. Capuchin friars who served the Lazaretto, kind of a field hospital where the infected are rigorously separated from the healthy. In light of the novel, how did Pope Francis see the mission of the Pope, or mission of the Church in the context of COVID-19? So this is what he's talking about in creativity, I suppose. Government policies, while the quarantining of the population is a sign. It's true a number of governments have taken exemplary measures to defend the population. Thinking, for example...
I originally got an article from like a right-wing news site and was like, I want something that's going to be a little more unbiased. And then it linked to this as its source material. And I got this and I was like, okay. And I sent this across to you. And this is just ginormous in terms of the amount of wording in it.
I know. And I'm just going through and like trying to parse all this crap out at this point. I just didn't have time to go through this one as much as I did the other two.
I don't think anyone had time to go through this one.
I don't think so either.
It's one of those
So
articles.
I was curious to know what the Pope saw the crisis and the economic devastation it is wreaking as a chance for an ecological conversion for reassessing priorities and lifestyles. I asked him concretely whether it was possible that we might see in the future an economy that, to use his words, was more human and less liquid. Okay.
I like that. That's a pretty cool phrasing.
I would have to ask what he meant by liquid because this doesn't seem to be answered in here.
A liquid, I believe, would refer to like financial liquidation, where there's more on the venture of investments and futures instead of actual production.
I don't know. I would say that it seems to me like when it says more human than liquid, that is more focused on people than on material wealth, I think is more what he's probably getting at there.
I think both of those are together. I think both of those are what he's referring to.
Right.
Yeah.
He says, "You asked me about conversion. Every crisis contains both danger and opportunity. The opportunity to move out from the danger. Today, I believe we have to slow down our rate of production and consumption and to learn to understand and contemplate the natural world. We need to reconnect with our real surroundings. This is the opportunity for conversion." So this is what he means by liquid economy versus human economy. Talking about our rate of production and consumption. Saying we need to slow that down. So I think that's leaning a little bit more towards my interpretation of it, but my interpretation's still not all the way there as to what he means.
Yeah.
We have lost the contemplative dimension. We have to get it back at this time. I'd love to know what he means of contemplative dimension.
I think what he's referring to is there's such an emphasis on consumerism
that no one's thinking anymore.
Yeah, we don't have free time. I've heard this from a lot of people who are borderline religious extremists, where they said that one of the greatest failures of the Western modern society is the lack of feast days associated with the church, because those were times that were almost like a vacation where you contemplated time with your family and you spent time in religious devotion. And the fact that those are not still here is part of what is leading to stress and necessity of vacation time and all the other things that they feel are the terribleness.
Okay, so this is one I'm gonna read this little paragraph that he talks about here, because it's an interesting take on this. He says, "I'm going to dare to offer some advice. This is the time to go underground, to go to the underground. I'm thinking of Dostoevsky's short novel, Notes from the Underground, which, by the way, is a really good read, if anyone hasn't read it. A lot of Dostoevsky stuff can be really dry, but this one's actually really good. So it says the employees of that prison hospital had become so inured they treated their poor prisoners like things. So almost seems like a throwback to this, leading into what we would recognize as the Stanford prison experiment back in the 70s. And seeing the way they treated one who had just died, the one on the bed alongside tells them enough. He too had a mother. We need to tell ourselves this often. That poor person had a mother who raised him lovingly. Later in life, we don't know what happened, but it helps to think of that love he once received through his mother's hope." So, to me, that's more of him talking to, we need to go back to that underground method of thinking of that everybody came from somewhere, everyone has a past, everyone had a particular start in life. It's to what degree does that change as time goes on, and we need to look for where those changes occur and see what we can do to, say, prevent them from happening in other people if they're bad changes.
But on a macro scale, talking about
right, but on a, he says to do this on a macro scale, and I'm not sure to what level you could actually achieve that without grossly infringing upon what we consider the rights of the individual, at least in this country. So, I don't know.
I think looking at the history of economic policies and specific laws and their impact upon the economy and on poverty and healthcare and other things like that, we can kind of see, well, where did these go wrong from where they were? And in some of those cases, if you're more, fiscally conservative leaning, you're going to say the moment they were signed into law. But that's kind of I think if you look at it on a macro scale in terms of the legislation and the policy, that's feasible. In terms of controlling people and trying to get groups of people to change, I don't think that's possible without grossly infringing upon liberties.
I agree with you on that one. You would ultimately infringe upon someone's liberty at some point. There's just no way to do that
Yeah.
without that happening. At least not as far as we've been able to determine. Though I would say, in general, human beings best left to their own devices, with little to no interference from any outside influence, will inevitably tend towards a capitalistic society where we trade with each other based on what we can provide.
So, whenever you're a kid, and you can tell me if I'm like completely veering off a religious territory now, but when you were a kid and you played video games, I mean, we're kind of in the same age group, so we probably had some similar stuff.
Yeah, you're how old?
Like early 32.
Okay, so yeah, you're almost yeah, we're the same age pretty much. So
So, did you
I'm
ever play,
31, so
did you ever play a video game and like as you were playing, you wanted to like get the level right, and you would make a mistake and get so frustrated you would just like hit the restart button?
mm,
I mean, it's happened. It had to happen at least one or two games.
I don't know. Maybe on one or two. Nothing specific comes to mind,
Yeah,
but one thing that I would have a tendency to do is I know that I'm not so much a perfectionist when it comes to games.
yeah,
I don't. I see them as while they can be fun, they can be a waste of time in some ways. I didn't really have video games much growing up, but one of my favorite games that I used to play uh, some 20 years ago uh, would have to be the first Halo game on the original Xbox when it first came out.
yeah,
And yeah, I'd play through the game and I beat it, and then and then I would start playing through the game over and over and progressively increasing the difficulty levels. And then every once in a while I'd go back down to the easiest difficulty, and yeah, I would challenge myself to, if someone actually shoots me or breaks my shield, well then I'm gonna start the level over
yeah. I remember.
because because I've beaten this on legendary. It's dumb for this to be able to break my shield on easy mode.
Yeah,
That means I'm getting lazy.
I remember whenever the game systems would actually have like a physical hard reset button on
Oh
the
yeah,
front.
like the NES and the Super NES. Yeah, no, I remember those too. One of my favorites was the Double Dragon game.
Hmm. You and you know that people were there because it had the on and off button was actually like a little power on click, or it would like slide up and down.
Yep.
But the reset button was spring loaded, so you know that there were people that were just sitting there going, "Arr, click, click."
Oh, without a doubt, I'm sure there were. I'm sure there still are to this day those that still have those systems if they're working.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly. It's amazing how much fun we used to be able to have on a piece of storage media that only consisted of about 8 MB.
yeah. I think that's probably what we're talking about is maybe on some of our greedy. And there's a difference between allowing greed to drive the economy because of self-interest, and overtly rewarding greed through legislation.
Yeah, I
And
can agree. I can agree that those two are, while not mutually exclusionary or mutually exclusive to each other or even diametrically opposed, I will say that those two concepts are definitely different ideas, and one is markedly better suited towards solid economic growth versus artificial growth.
yeah, artificial growth. One is more democratic of an idea, and one of them is only in support of an oligarchy.
True. And I would say not even a more democratic idea. I would say more meritocratic.
Yeah. But
I would say egalitarianism, meritocracy. That's more the way we need to go, more than anything else. That everybody's got an equal shake starting out, and then their outcome is determined based on what they choose to do with their starting point.
yeah,
I've never understood demanding equality of outcome for people. That doesn't make sense to me. Because at that point, if you institute equality of outcome, the government's natural tendency is to put everyone at an equal level of misery.
yeah.
Everyone is equally broke.
How do you know you made the most just decision? Because no one's happy.
Exactly. Nobody's happy and everybody lost. Except the government, because they generally end up with more power out of it.
Yeah.
What's funny is that that reminds me of that character from Parks and Recreation, Ron Swanson.
Mm-hmm.
He's meant to be a caricature of libertarianism, but in all honesty, he's one of the greatest examples of it. I'm not joking. I mean, okay, yeah, there are some things that are a little extreme there in the character that are just off the wall stupid.
Name one.
Name one. His purchasing of a typewriter to use in conjunction with the internet to write nonsense reviews to go tape to people's doors.
I see nothing wrong with that.
You see nothing wrong with that. I mean, I love the idea of the typewriter. The typewriter was cool in and of itself. But I don't think you should go up and just shame a vegan restaurant or give them a bad review just because you don't like the concept, you don't like the thought of veganism. And I know vegan libertarians, so they're not exclusionary as far as that goes.
Should I give my thoughts on veganism right now, or is this not the time or place?
This is probably not the time or place. I personally don't agree with veganism. Not because of any...
It's not the time or place for me, but it is for you.
Because basically the reason why I don't agree with veganism is science. And that's it. That's as far as I'm willing to go with it right now.
I mean, my thoughts
So if you can make it that simple, go for it.
Yeah, it's really simple. More power to you if you want to eat the diet that you feel is most comfortable or is most just. I despise when you fake meat. That's what I hate.
Oh, yeah, okay. So at that point, yeah, you miss meat, and then it's like, we're going to make a fake version of it. Because I'm sorry. I've had one of the Impossible Whoppers. They don't taste like meat.
They're good. It's just not meat.
Yeah, they're okay at best. And also, I mean, yeah, it's made on the same griddle as all the other burgers, so I hate to say it, any vegan that orders an Impossible Whopper is getting meat bits and meat grease in that burger. And you're going to be eating a meat product of some kind in that.
I do really like vegan cuisine that is not trying to be meat at all. I've had some Mediterranean and Indian vegan dishes.
Yeah, and some of those are fantastic.
Oh, so good.
But to me, nothing beats, as far as Indian cuisine goes, beef or pork vindaloo. That's like one of my absolute favorite things. Butter chicken is good too, though.
I love the I can't even remember what they're called, but they're the little crunchy orbs. They pop it and they put the potato salad in there and the cilantro, and then they put like the pani puri. There we go.
I don't think I've had that, so that's something I would like to try. That sounds pretty good. Anyways, so we're getting off topic here. So we're going to move on to our next article. Well, actually, our last article currently, and that is.
Wait.
What?
We talked about the last article, but we didn't even hit the point that the big like quote that he had. That was the big. What's the word I'm looking for? The controversial statement he said.
Oh, where was it at? I missed it, I guess.
He makes a statement in there where it's like, like COVID-19 is nature's response to people having bad uh, environmental policy or something.
Oh,
Just
okay. So basically, he's a low-key M. Night Shyamalan fan who watched The Happening.
basically,
I
but
mean,
that's what a lot of
that's
people.
all that's all I really got for that one. Is like that seems really it's like it's assuming nature has a consciousness to it. I mean, I'm not necessarily opposed to that potentially being the case, just that there's absolutely no evidence of that.
I I personally, from a religious standpoint, really disliked the way that it was worded. If we could find the exact quote that's in there, because I've seen all the headlines, but the way it's worded anthropomorphizes. Uh, I added too many syllables in there, but it treats nature as if it has some kind of consciousness, and it sounds like a
Right, that
neo.
it has some kind of agency that there's really not any evidence for that.
And I was not a fan of that particular wording. Now, in terms of impact and effect, I think that there is a truth to it, that there's a natural order, and if you are not following the natural order, then your actions will have reactions. That's just how ecology works. And so it will lead to negative impacts. If you have overpopulation in specific areas, you don't have
Right,
running
you're
water.
talking about cause and effect essentially.
Yeah, but I don't
Um,
like treating
okay,
it like
this
it
is
has.
so yeah, this is what he says. There is an expression in Spanish: God always forgives. We forgive sometimes, but nature never forgives. We did not respond to the partial catastrophes. Who now speaks of the fires in Australia, or remembers that 18 months ago a boat could cross the North Pole because the glaciers had all melted? Who speaks now of the floods? I don't know if these are the revenge of nature, but they are certainly nature's responses.
Yeah, not a fan of that wording.
Well, I
Those
mean,
are
okay,
unrelated
yeah,
events.
I'm not a fan of calling it nature's response because that doesn't really make any sense because a response is something that implies a level of intelligibility, an ability to be understood, or not even really that, but an ability to reason and to make a decision. Nature doesn't really necessarily make decisions. You know, things happen and it causes effects. Like, that's really all that is.
And also, like glaciers melting in the Arctic and arsonists setting fire in Australia have nothing to do with coronaviruses.
No, they don't. They don't at all. Um, but there again, this comes from a Catholic perspective. So one of their major arguments for the existence of God is the five ways as explained by Thomas Aquinas, and one of those is um, an argument from cause,
Hmm.
and we may get to that here a little later. So that's kind of where he's kind of going with that one. It's almost like he's talking about some sort of divine butterfly effect.
Yeah, I mean, but I hear the same.
But that again speaks to a logical fallacy, like what we were talking about prior to the start of the show, which the logical fallacy is post hoc ergo propter hoc, meaning this, therefore, because of this. It's a tendency in human beings to, it's a natural tendency too, to think that because something happened before something else, the thing that happened before must have caused that other thing. Like that's one of the biggest logical fallacies at play within the anti-vax movement, is they think, oh, this child got vaccinations, later they were diagnosed with autism, vaccinations cause autism. Even though, in just looking at it, looking at the scientific aspect of it, we know that that is not the case.
I heard a comment. Well, never mind. It has mostly to do with vaccination, so it has nothing to do with this.
I mean, we can address it real quick because I did kind of bring that up.
Uh, okay. Well, I heard a comment from someone who's an anti-vaxxer, and they basically stated that they were kind of talking about, oh, they use the mercury um, as a
Preservative.
preservative, and they mention, which is not straight mercury, it's like a mercury derivative, and
it's not a mercury derivative. What it is, it's an ethyl mercury.
Yeah.
Ethyl mercury passes through the body harmlessly because it doesn't bind with anything. It's the kind of mercury that you sometimes find in tuna.
But it also, well, that's weird that you would say that it passes through the body, because you're not supposed to eat more than 3 or 4 servings of tuna.
Right, because there are some naturally occurring mercuries in tuna that are methylated. They're methyl mercuries.
Oh, okay. Those
do bind with your blood cells and actually starve them of oxygen, and you kind of suffocate through your blood. So here's the thing, though. Ethyl mercury was a component of a particular preservative called thimerosal, which is no longer used. It hasn't been used in any vaccines in the United States since the late 90s, early 2000s. And in fact, it was never used in the single dose shots that we've given for ages now. Yeah. It was only used as a preservative in the actual like large vials that were sent to other countries, because otherwise the medicine wouldn't survive the trip.
I've heard that those large vials are used in specific instances within the United States.
In the event that a single dose is not available.
Yeah.
And that's generally only in rural areas or areas that can only get X amount of supplies or have X amount of storage space for medical supplies. So you're talking like the wilds of friggin' Alaska.
I thought that it was the opposite of the rural areas, because the single doses were easier to store and keep there. It was the more densely populated urban areas. And
some of those did end up with them as well, because they would run out of the single doses.
Yeah.
But that's still a rarity in and of itself.
Yeah.
That's still a very distinct rarity. That does not happen often. But even so, the way you make sure that you don't potentially harm someone, like ethyl mercury in small doses will just pass through your body. Yeah. If it sits in your body long enough, or you get a large enough dose of it, it can spontaneously methylate.
Yeah.
But again, we do not use it as a preservative in vaccines anymore. We haven't for over a decade, probably 20 years at this point.
So the reason why I was having this conversation with this person was, there's a conspiracy theory out there now that, the mercury that is in vaccines, it interacts with 5G, and then it causes your body to irradiate or whatever, and it gives you diseases, and it's meant to population control, kill you, or mind control you, or whatever.
Okay, so is this person here in Texas with us?
Yes.
We're going to go for proximity effect on this one. Whoever you are, you need to be working on getting weed legalized, because apparently your dealer has got some amazing shit.
So this is actually a widespread conspiracy that's out there. This isn't just an individual, okay? I've looked into it.
Still, whoever their hookup is, they apparently are growing some great shit.
And when I say this is not just an individual, this is widespread, and I've looked into it, I do not agree with this. I'm only stating that there is more than a handful of people that actually do agree with this.
Right. No. Hey, I dive down the rabbit hole and research conspiracy theories all the time. I mean, I will sit here and freely admit right now that I used to love listening to Alex Jones's podcast, because it was an unending slow motion train wreck of terrible ideas, horrible logic, complete lack of reason, and would make for some hilarious outtakes, in all honesty. That being said, I stopped listening to it even before he got like whatever the shadow banning or any of that bullshit was, or
Yeah.
anything else that happened to him. And that's in large part due to the fact that it stopped being funny and it turned into these just giant, long, drawn out commercials for the bullshit he's trying to hawk.
So the person I was speaking to, I told them about, I explained the whole mercury thing, not used, whatever. And here's what they came back with that I couldn't argue with.
Go for it.
They came back with, when I was in the military, they gave me vaccine cocktails, and there's no telling what was in those. And I think they were doing medical experiments.
Okay. So your simple response with that is, do you know what was in those? If you don't, then you have no proof of anything. You have no evidence. All you have evidence of is that you got a shot in the military. Or you got a series of shots.
They were forced to sign waivers and stuff before receiving them, which is kind of normal for medical stuff.
Well, they wouldn't be forced to sign waivers. They're like to join the military. It's a voluntary thing, and so you volunteer for stuff like that when you sign on the dotted line.
Yeah.
Whether you agree with it or not, that's fine. But again, this is an entirely volunteer service. You don't have to sign up and join the military. So if you disagree with it or you don't like the fact that that could happen to you, don't go to the recruiter. Don't sign on the line.
So all of your comments are correct, but they're kind of sidestepping the point, which is that their fear of immunizations has to do with a specific moment in their life where they do.
For some, yes. For some, yes, and for the person that you spoke with, absolutely, I agree with that. Their fear stems from a particular occurrence in their lifetime. However, they would have to be able to show some kind of evidence to support that claim, other than I got a shot in the military and I don't know precisely what was in it.
And they're not going to be able to have that evidence until open records happens, which is,
I mean, he or she could submit a FOIA request for for immunizations delivered to him while in the military.
Yeah.
I mean, those are technically his records, so he or she should have access to those. So there are methods of which to obtain that information. But I guarantee you, if that were to happen, and this individual did receive those records, and it showed that there was nothing out of the ordinary, that what would happen next is the person would go, well, they just redacted it, or they didn't include everything. There would be some convenient excuse as to why they would not be able to accept that was not the case. That their assumption without evidence is somehow still valid in spite of evidence to the contrary.
The thing that
because that's what happens with anti-vaxxers all the time. You tell them there's not mercury in vaccines, there hasn't been in decades, and they say, well, it's still in there, they just call it something else, or it's still in there, they just don't put it on the ingredients list now. There's always something else.
Yeah.
To further the conspiracy, but yeah.
That there aren't any historic examples of when the FDA has been okay with not listing ingredients.
Precisely. And then we point that out, and then they will make up some other convenient nonsense, such as, well, the FDA is a government entity. The FDA is a government organization. Of course they're going to tell you that because they're in on it. They're part of the conspiracy.
But as far as the military aspect, there have been cases where people asked and they were denied and told it never happened. And then as soon as, was it the 50 or the 60-year mark hits, whatever that year mark is.
Yes, there were instances with things like the Tuskegee experiments. So yeah, I agree. But there again, there was legislation put in place after events like that to prevent that from happening again.
Well, the Tuskegee experiments were to the general public. That wasn't limited to the military.
No, but it was things like that that caused legislation to be changed and caused military policy to be changed as well, because there were similar things that had occurred in the military. Not necessarily the Tuskegee experiments, but other medical experimentation that was conducted.
Yeah, the medical experiment story I was hearing about recently that they were talking about is where they were sending troops into trenches at the testing of the atom bomb to see how it would react. And there was a survivor who was saying, like, he could see through whenever he covered his hands.
Yes, it was those that weren't in the trenches. They were on ships, away from Bikini Atoll, when they did nuclear testing out there. Yeah, you're right. And it's because of things like that that military policy was forcibly changed.
Yeah, but that lawsuit is still currently ongoing.
Right, that lawsuit is ongoing because there's no precedent for it.
Yeah.
And so this is essentially a landmark case that the precedent set by this will be a gross determining factor in future lawsuits should they ever come about, because there's no understanding of any potential statute of limitations. There's no understanding of, okay, well, does your military contract cover things like this when you sign on the dotted line? Should this be looked at in a civil court under U.S. law, or should this be looked at under UCMJ, the Uniform Code of Military Justice? There are all these legal questions that are having to be asked to govern this thing, so it's not surprising that this particular case is going to take a long time. Now, I sincerely hope that justice is served for these veterans that went through this unwittingly and have ended up with cancer, with these horrible diagnoses and things like that have died from the radiation exposure and the fallout exposure and things like that. However, I do see this taking a long time to actually determine, and with the way military contracts are worded, as far as when a person signs up, I don't know. This could go either way on that one, but I sincerely hope it does go in favor of the veterans. So we'll see. But all that being said, that still doesn't provide evidence for this individual's claims of this so-called vaccination cocktail they received.
Yeah.
And that brings me to, again, something that we were talking about earlier. You mentioned you'd watch this movie, or this documentary, Psychonautics. And you mentioned a quote in there, talking about a plurality of anecdotes is not data. And so the actual quote of that, I can't remember exactly who said it, but it is, the plural of anecdote is not data. It means that no matter how many anecdotes you have, that does not become data. That still is just a collection of anecdotes. And so, you know what? That's the Atheist Reformation public service announcement of the week. The plural of anecdote is not data. Because that also goes to another particular logical fallacy that we actually see in advertising all the time. It's called the argumentum ad populum, or an argument to the masses, an argument to the public or the population. You know how you see those commercials, millions of people can't be wrong, that kind of thing? You remember those commercials, right? And
yeah.
They're still going today. Well, yes, they can be. Millions of people can be completely wrong. They very much can be. So, yeah.
Millions of people can't be tyrants.
Say what?
Millions of people can't be tyrants. The tyranny of the majority.
Yeah. Anyway, So let's move on to our final story of the day, and then we'll get into something a little bit different, something we haven't done on the Sunday show before, but seems like kind of a special, fun thing to do.
What?
With
What
this, I don't know. Apparently, they're agreeing with something. I don't know what it is that they're agreeing with, but anyway, this is talking about state versus church.
Mm.
Yeah. Kentucky
Sweet
COVID-19 cases up by 242. Total that is a really nice looking guitar.
Are we sponsored?
I wish. Oh my gosh, I would love to be sponsored by Sweetwater or any guitar company. Oh, now that's pretty. Total is 1,693 state to quarantine churchgoers. So, we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to bypass that. Close that. Governor Andy Beshear on Friday in Kentucky announced 242 new cases of novel coronavirus in Kentucky, the largest single-day increase yet, bringing the statewide total to at least approximately 1,700. 11 more Kentuckians have died from COVID-19 complications, bringing the total number of deaths in Kentucky up to 90. As the state climbs towards its peak, Beshear said he would order anyone who attended an in-person church service or other gathering this Easter weekend in violation of his executive orders to self-quarantine for 2 weeks. This is so their decision can't spread the virus to another individual who can spread the virus to another individual, and so on, the governor said. Okay, so this is really just seems like on its face, an enforcement on not coming together in gatherings of 10 or more people.
So on its surface, I'm kind of okay with encouraging people and telling them quarantine if you're going to go to a church service so you don't get anyone else infected. I get that. I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Here's where things get weird, though.
In Lexington, officials announced 9 new coronavirus cases for a total of 197. And in Louisville, another 32 people have contracted the viral respiratory disease for a total of 520. Local officials in the state's largest city also said 6 more of its residents have died. Those deaths were announced on Friday across Kentucky include a 73, 75, 73, 68, 92, 66-year-old men, all in Jefferson County. 77-year-old man in Butler County, 75-year-old woman in Meade County, and 3 other deaths, all 70s and 80s, in McCracken, Hopkins, and Davies or Davis County. What was that?
Nothing.
Did you opened a carbonated beverage, didn't you?
No.
Don't lie to me.
I was playing with a taser.
Seriously?
Yes.
Show me. Put the taser down, Harry. If you're not zapping yourself for our amusement, leave it alone. Anyways.
Deal with.
Continuing on, talks about more. I like that we all want to defeat the virus, he said, but one of the only ways we're going to be able to start easing restrictions is if Kentucky has the capacity to test a whole lot of people that we aren't right now. Okay, so requiring a greater capacity for testing that they don't currently have. Okay, that's understandable. It's a growing problem in nursing homes, so state to require church attendees to quarantine. Expecting that a handful of churches and other groups across Kentucky will defy his executive order and have in-person mass gatherings on Easter Sunday, Beshear said local officials are being directed to record license plate numbers of participants to pass to local health departments. Those who attend these gatherings can expect public health officials to show up at their doors with mandates that they self-quarantine for 14 days, the governor said. If you're going to expose yourself to this virus, it is not fair to everybody else out there that you might spread it to. Understand this is the only way we can ensure your decision doesn't kill somebody else. This order does not apply to drive-in services. Okay, so if you're just driving up and they're having one of those drive-in theater type things, and it's just they're doing it through the car stereos. It seems that that's not being ordered because social distancing is taking place and they're not really quote unquote mass gathering, I suppose, because they're all contained within their own vehicles. So the recording license plate numbers, though, that's a little off-putting.
Recording license plate numbers and then using that data to go door to door.
Yeah.
That's, the Supreme Court decision just said that it's reasonable to assume that the person riding in a vehicle is the owner of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is not good.
No, I don't like this idea, personally. Okay, if you're going to do something, you need to not do license plate number recordings. You would need to have the health department outside waiting for the service to be over in their proper quarantine gear and then issue the mandates as they exit the building.
I'm okay with that.
That's how that should go, because I know of plenty of instances where people will borrow a friend's car to go somewhere because there's something wrong with theirs, and that could ultimately end up in someone who didn't even go to this being held accountable for it when they had nothing to do with it. So I vehemently disagree with the recording of license plates and delaying going and talking to these people, because at that point that seems as though you're just using it as a scare tactic and you're not actually intending to do anything. Because if you're just having officials record license plate numbers and then they're going to go door to door later on, what's to stop any of those people from going 100 other places before you actually show up at their door?
Not only that, but how many people actually update their registration when they move?
That too. I mean, so at best, if they want to really enforce something like this, then no, they need to go whole hog with it. PD cruiser rolls by a church. Hey, we've got a large number of vehicles here. You might want to alert the health department, and then have some kind of health department official out there, or intern, whoever, some essential employee standing out there, and then ready to hand out these mandatory self-quarantines.
Now, let me clarify. When I said I'm okay with that, meaning I'm okay with them going outside the church after the service and handing out the paper, I'm okay with that way of informing people. But I don't know exactly what is going on in that mandate for self-quarantine to know if I agree or disagree with it. But if there's any kind of punishment for further attending church or anything along those lines, if they're saying, well, because you went to church on Easter, you'll be arrested if you go back to church the following Sunday, I would very much be against that.
I would as well, because that's a First Amendment infringement. However, they are issuing fines in some states for gatherings of 10 or more.
Did you hear about the person who got pulled over for paddle boating out in the water by like the Coast Guard in California for violating the
quarantine
outing?
Huh? No, I didn't hear that.
The only person within 6 feet of me is you, officer.
True. But anyway, so all right, so that's our state versus church story there. I think that pretty much covers everything as far as that goes. So now we're going to move on to kind of a little special segment here, just so we can kind of not necessarily, this is not really to pad the broadcast, but I was talking with Elijah on Discussions with Atheists yesterday, And after the show, we determined that we're going to have another show coming up this coming Saturday evening after my roundtable with the Reason and Theology group. And we're going to talk about particular arguments for the existence of God. And so I had to be cruising through some parts of Facebook today, and I did come across someone who claims to have 12 cosmological arguments for the existence of God. So credit to this particular user for writing a fair few of these, such as this one here. And we're kind of going to go through a couple of things on here and see what you personally think about them, Harry, and what level of validity you think they have. And I'll explain my problems with them. Refers to Genesis 1:1, says that God is the creator of the cosmos. The cosmological arguments prove the existence of God by demonstrating the necessity of a creator for the cosmos. The cosmological arguments offer good reason through circumstantial evidence taken from the nature of the cosmos itself to believe in God. The following is a listing and explanation of all the known cosmological arguments for the existence of God. So, we're going to use one of the user's first ones. And for those who think I'm doxing this individual, no, I'm not. This is fair use of content that was shared on Facebook in a public Facebook group. So, at best, this is probably someone's pseudonym. Your first one is the dichotomy of existence. Says the dichotomy of existence proves the existence of God by demonstrating the necessity of an uncaused creator with the power to create any or all the infinite potentials for physical reality to the fullest extent logically possible under everythingness. I have several problems with this statement.
Can I get some dressing for that word salad?
Yeah, no kidding. So it seems that he's talking about, to some degree, universals. And that's a very dense philosophical topic that I'm going to try to avoid getting too deep into.
And I'm a philosophical person.
Say what?
And I'm a very dense and unphilosophical person.
But yeah, so universals are talking about a quality, like that everything kind of has a ness to it. For instance, the question of, is a hot dog a sandwich?
Hot dog is delicious.
But is a hot dog a sandwich?
I've had a hot dog sandwich before.
Is a hot dog a sandwich? That's the question, Harry.
At Wiener Schnitzel, yes.
Why?
Because they get 2 pieces of bread, they cut it in half, and they put it on there.
Okay, so why isn't a peanut butter and jelly on a single piece of bread folded together not a sandwich?
Because it's a taco.
No, it's still a sandwich, isn't it? And so that therein lies the issue. We have to talk about what is a sandwich. What is sandwichness?
God is...
Say what?
God is not a sandwich.
Quit trying to shuck and jive, Harry. You're not a politician.
No, I'm serious. That's my legitimate argument, but it doesn't really have anything to do with a specific cosmological argument. It's that the nature.
Well, that's what he's getting at when he's
talking
talking about. What I say when he's talking about universals, he's talking about under everythingness. That's arguing that everything is somehow a universal. But that doesn't make any sense, is what I'm saying. Because he talks about infinite potentials for physical reality. What he should be talking about is, in the concept of universals, these things called particulars. A particular is something like this coin, or this soda can, or this microphone. You know, so at that point, this is a particular of what you would call a universal. The universal of this would be coin-ness or microphone-ness. And so we'd have to try and get down and break down what is the essence of being a coin that talks about all coins, that encompasses all coins. And so the idea of a universal, at least in the Platonist view of things, would be that there is some thing out there, there is a physical thing out there that represents coinness, but is not a particular and has no other properties aside from coin or can or microphone. And that's one of the problems within it, is that that doesn't really make a lot of sense, because whenever we think of a coin or a microphone, philosophically, a particular comes to mind. A specific microphone, a specific coin, a specific can, or a particular is what that is. And so that's what it's talking about here, and it doesn't seem that he really understands what universals are. Now, universals are, like I said, a very dense philosophical topic. It is very nuanced. There are several schools of thought governing how we view or how we see universals, and none of them really agree with each other. And there's problems with all of them. So, yeah. Anyway. Although in some aspects of Christianity or some aspects of philosophy, Harry, God is indeed a sandwich.
I don't see it.
Well, no, it's in that God is the universal. He is the universal of universals that governs everything else. So God represents sandwichness, coinness, canness, microphoneness within his nature, within his ness. So
here's the problem with that. Basically, what's going on is people are taking a concept that is difficult to explain or understand, or that just the majority of people won't have a strong grasp of. And
right.
what they're doing is saying, because I know that this is a difficult thing to discuss, and because it's a difficult thing to explain, and because I know it's a new concept that's pretty mind-blowing for most people, I'm going to define God as this concept to explain it so that I can justify the existence of God, because they're not going to be able to argue with me about this thing that they also don't understand very well.
Right, and that tends to be the case. So moving on to it, he talks about in terms of the uncaused, there are only two possibilities. The first is the uncaused reason for the existence of all physical reality. The second is the uncaused absence of any reality called absolute nothingness. That's not a dichotomy. So, in all honesty, this particular argument fails in the first two sentences. So, because of that, I'm not even going to grant a reading of the rest of this crap. I will simply move on to the next asserted argument that he...
What was the dichotomy he gave there?
So the dichotomy he provides is either the uncaused reason for the existence of all physical reality, or the uncaused absence of any reality called absolute nothingness. That's the dichotomy he's presenting, because he says in the terms of the uncaused there are only two possibilities. So he's talking about the third law of logic, which is the law of excluded middle, which this actually fails miserably. And the law of excluded middle simply states that for any one thing, there can only be two possibilities, either A or not A. So what that would mean is that this right here is either a coin or not a coin. It can't be both of these things.
Okay, so he's saying...
It cannot be both a coin and not a coin. But what he's talking about is that he's saying that that the actual possibility he's talking about in the first part, which he says is the first uncaused reason for the existence of all physical reality. that doesn't, you can get rid of everything after reason in that sentence, because everything else is just word salad attached to it. So his saying is the two possibilities are uncaused reason and uncaused absence. That's not a dichotomy. He's actually presented two dichotomies there. And here's why. So the two dichotomies being presented is uncaused reason versus caused reason, and then uncaused absence versus caused absence. Those are dichotomies, philosophically speaking. What he's presented is not a dichotomy at all.
Well, okay, so I partly agree with you, but I think that he might have been going a different route. I think there are two dichotomies. The two dichotomies are caused versus uncaused.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's ignoring everything about caused and focusing just on uncaused reason and uncaused absence.
Right, and that's a problem in and of itself, because that's operating under the assumption that we have completely eliminated the explanatory power of caused reason or caused absence.
Does he come back around to answer
No, he doesn't.
that half of it later?
No, not at all. Because he asserts that this uncaused reason and uncaused absence are the only two possibilities. So he doesn't even address anything else but these things.
Wait, that doesn't make sense if he's saying that it's a proof of God, because the uncaused reason and the uncaused absence would both not require God. God would be the cause. Is he invalidating?
No, he's basically trying to repack an Aquinas argument of the uncaused cause or the unmoved mover. That God is the cause of everything, but there is no cause for God. That God is the uncaused cause of everything.
Okay.
Which, from the atheist side of things, we kind of laugh at, because all that is a fallacy of special pleading. We're saying that in every other circumstance that we can possibly observe, causes have effects. But in this one circumstance that we call God, there is no cause for his existence. That's a fallacy of special pleading. Because it's being done arbitrarily.
I just really don't like the whole aspect of even questioning whether or not God has a cause or not a cause. Like, that's just too far past what I'm comfortable even asking.
Yeah. So I'm just going to go on to what he was trying to repack, which is the first cause argument by St. Thomas Aquinas.
Okay.
He says the first cause argument proves the existence of God by demonstrating that all causes and effects in the cosmos must ultimately derive from a very first cause that we call God. In the cosmos, we observe that for every cause there is an effect. We also observe that every effect is itself a cause for a subsequent effect. Like a line of falling dominoes, the first falling domino causes the fall of the second domino, etc., etc. And says the cosmos unfolds as a series of causes and effects over time. Then he says that because an infinite regress in time of causes and effects is impossible, which has never actually been demonstrated, so there's that, there must be a very first cause of the cosmic series of causes and events. We observe that cause and effect in the cosmos follows an order where A causes B and B causes C, whether the intermediate cause B is only a single cause or several causes. Now, to take away the cause is to take away the effect. Therefore, if there is no cause A, then there will be no ultimate cause C, yada, yada, yada. It says, but if an infinite regress in time of causes and effects were possible, there would not be a first cause, and so neither would there be an ultimate cause, and so on and so forth. It's an argument from it. This argument is based on Aristotelian physics, in particular arguments of motion. And this creates several problems. A lot of it comes from Aristotelian physics arguing that celestial bodies don't move. They're fixed in space and time. They don't ever move. We know this is not the case. We see stars move all the time. We see planets move. We observe this. And so that's one kind of way that this kind of fails.
Wait, how does that affect this failure?
Because Aquinas's argument for the first cause is a retelling of Aristotle's argument of the unmoved mover.
Okay, but if planets move, how does that make cause and effect fall apart?
Because Aristotle argues for this kind of perfect motion, in this particular perfect ceaseless motion. Like I said, this is a really dense philosophical thing on this one in and of itself.
Well, let's just strip it down and say everything came from something.
Okay, that's fine. Everything comes from something. But here's the problem. When you look at actual physics, we arrive at an issue. Because time and space are not separate. It's space-time.
Okay.
So if that is the case, at the moment the Big Bang occurs, that's when space-time exists.
Yeah.
Which means there is no before the Big Bang. Which would mean there...
I call it God spoke, whatever, same difference.
But here's the thing. If time doesn't exist, if there is no before the Big Bang, that means there is no time. Yeah. Cause and effect is temporal, meaning cause must come before effect. So there is innate temporality that cannot be escaped.
Okay.
Which means that if God caused the universe, that means time is somehow outside the universe. But we know that's not the case because time is part of the universe.
Time is part of the universe. God is outside of time.
But if he's able to cause things to happen, then by necessity he becomes temporal. Because if things happen before things, you must have time. If you exist outside of time, then as far as we're concerned, you don't exist. Because you can't do anything.
If you introduce a catalyst into a petri dish, you are not subject to the catalyst. Only the subjects and the molecules and microbes in the petri dish.
But you are still in the same frame of reference as that catalyst.
Do the microbes in the petri dish, are they aware of that?
They don't have to be.
They don't have to be.
So I would argue that they're not aware of anything because they don't have an ability to really be aware of anything.
So how does that affect your ability to be immune to the catalyst and still have control over it?
Because you're still introducing something in a series.
Okay.
You're still inside time. Time isn't a catalyst in and of itself.
Is it not? Philosophically?
No, not really. Not to my knowledge, anyway.
I mean, it's what causes things to happen.
Things happen within time.
But without
time doesn't cause things. Time allows things to happen.
Allowing something to happen and causing it
are different
concepts to you then.
Yes. For instance, like
that's a moral argument. That's not a scientific argument.
No, it's not even a moral argument. For instance, a mountain will erode.
Yeah.
Okay, time doesn't cause that.
Yes, it does.
No, wind causes that.
Wind
just happens within time. Time did not cause that in and of itself.
Then if
There's a difference between cause and
space-time
facilitation.
if space-time is together as a single unit, how is there a difference between energy, matter, and time if they are connected?
So, matter and energy are different.
But they
Ti-
interchange.
yes, they can change from one form to another. Matter
So
can become energy, energy can become matter.
all matter could be transformed into energy, and all energy could be formed into matter.
Yes.
So they are like substance at that point.
They can share similar properties. They are
They
not
can
the
share
same.
different
They are
properties.
not the same substance. Just because one can turn into the other does not make them the same.
Okay, but there's no graphite energy. It's all kinetic potential.
No, it's kinetic. You have kinetic energy and potential energy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and radiation. Like there's no
that's
such
still
thing.
it's still kinetic and potential at that point usually.
Yeah,
But
everything energy.
so matter does become energy, but
Yeah.
energy put into matter can instigate different matter. So it's not necessarily energy becoming matter, more that, well, no, in essence, because the energy is retained at that point.
It's matter's relationship to energy that determines what matter that energy becomes.
Yeah, or vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, like, for instance, time in and of itself, like, when you talk about motion and things like that, part of what Aristotle argues for, and Aquinas does as well, is this concept of absolute motion. There's no such thing as absolute motion.
I don't know if I really understand the concept of absolute motion.
Absolute motion is that motion will happen regardless of time.
That doesn't make any sense to me.
Hence why the argument begins to fall apart, because cause and effect is temporal. So if you're arguing for motion or cause and effect without time, then you're not arguing for motion at all.
But even in his day, that argument couldn't hold water because it would show that motion is impossible.
Right, because if I take a picture of this coin as it falls, at any one point, is motion actually occurring? No. So at that point, motion doesn't exist.
Yeah. Well, you could also.
But we know that motion exists because we saw this thing move, and so this is why we say that cause and effect and motion are inextricably tied to time.
Yes.
In that you cannot have them without it. And so when we talk about motion, we talk about inertial reference frames.
Okay.
Like the thing with, like, I'm going to bring up flat earthers on this one, because it's honestly, it has nothing to do with being low-hanging fruit or that I'm making fun of them. It's just because it's the most readily available example right now. It's also relevant, unfortunately, not to this, but in general. They talk about, okay, well, if we're on a spinning ball in space that's spinning at 1,000 miles an hour, why aren't we flung off? And it's because of an inertial reference frame. We, on the ground of this massive object, are incapable of perceiving that speed of moving at 1,000 miles an hour, of rotating at 1,000 miles an hour, because that seems crazy, that seems ridiculously fast. But at the same time, you also have to look at it, that is one full rotation in 24 hours. So in the inertial reference frame of a planet, that's slow. Like, for instance, I'm rotating this, right?
Yeah.
That's relatively slow, right? So this coin is about an inch in diameter. So that means one full rotation in about a second. So that's about an inch a second. Okay, well, let's shrink that down and look at it on a micro scale. That's something in this moving at, say, I don't know, 10,000, like a billion nanometers a second. That sounds crazy until you understand what the inertial reference frame is.
Right.
And that's what we have to deal with there. But anyways, I think that about covers this one. And we're at about the hour and a half mark, and I'd say we're getting into some really hardcore philosophy here. So we might want to go ahead and call this because my roommate does have to work here soon.
Okay.
So I think this kind of length here is doing a little bit better for us. We seem to get through and hit the high points, and we actually have a little bit deeper discussion on things without getting too much into the weeds on a whole bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to revisit this particular topic with you at a later date.
Okay.
If you think it might be interesting.
Yeah.
So, bringing everything back around, please like, comment, and subscribe. Click the notification bell icon so you get notifications of when we're going to be having more shows. All the articles are linked in the video description below. Please remember to like and follow the Atheist Reformation on Facebook.com/The Atheist Reformation. And if you want to submit a story or something like that, send it to the Atheist Reformation at gmail.com. And always remember, the plural of anecdote is not data. Have a great day, everybody. As Harry loses complete control of his screen.